Hey, all right. We're back with some Factorio. Here we go. I am Pax, and we are going through the Factorio space exploration base today. And just the plan is to actually do a little bit of a base tour and work in some tutorials and just check out and admire the space exploration base. And so, first, we'll start off by kind of going over the history of the base, and of course we still have kept our spaceship wreckage around, and so we landed over here very early on and had our starter material around here. And then this was our very first starter base. I'm happy to keep it around still. I almost want to hook it back up or something, but basically, yeah, we got through this starter base. And what was great about it is this process fuel. So space exploration uses this processed fuel here to give everything some power. And yeah, essentially we just came over here and built this little this base for red science and all the early kind of materials and stuff. I'm literally just goofing off here. But then I think it was clever to have to use these like shared fuel lanes to power all the buildings, because all these burners actually use, these are actually burner assembling machines, and they need fuel. And so this kind of clever setup to keep the fuel, get the fuel everywhere, use the iron shared belts with some of these single cylinder engines. And yeah, then these are the very first turrets we built to defend our base way back when. And then we started working on, of course, building a smelting array, and this is our original layout for the smelting, our big smelting columns. And this was like really the start of the main bus era of the base. We got built these as smelting columns, and then built up here a kind of vertical traditional Factorio main bus setup. And then we built essentially this red and green science hub. So this is our red and green science early game hub to build all the buildings, and kind of a design based on some starter bases from the vanilla Factorio game I've seen, where often you'll build a lane here of green circuits and gears, but kind of the SpaceX variation use these electric motors as replacements to green circuits, and then the single cylinder engines were kind of a more complicated gear system. And man, it just needed so much iron that I just decided to dedicate a whole thing of iron. And all these other little intermediate iron products I just built on the spot, like gears and iron sticks. And eventually, yeah, we set up red and green science, added some green circuit production, and built the more advanced materials, brought in all the other types of buildings, and, you know, just using these setups with the red inserters and the buildings to away is a pretty powerful way to get a lot of the logistics done. And so then as we get more and more advanced, we have, you know, almost 12 items, 10 items, I guess, to feed all these different buildings. And yeah, this has been serving us for basically the whole game, and it still builds a lot of the main buildings that we use even still. And of course then continue to build out for the military science and the chemical science, and extended the main bus. Then eventually, of course, we had to build the oil, and built the oil products down here. And by the time we had to get oil, we really needed to start using trains as well. So we started building kind of this early train network where we just had kind of one-way trains and built out to these oil wells and this iron out here. So this was like one of the first irons we got on the train network. Still giving us a little bit of iron. It's finally almost out though. And yeah, still the trains are being used now to feed the main hub. But then we have this space exploration oil but mostly just stuck with the light oil. But I think it is wise to maybe have one of these be this alternative recipe, just because you need to make a lot more lubricant than this. So that helps balance it. Of course, we built all the chemical products, green circuits, red circuits, then finished up the main bus by building all the components for the rocket science. And the rocket science is sort of like normal Factorio space science, but it comes a little bit earlier. And of course, you have to launch the conventional Factorio rocket, and of course, building radars is a lot more tricky in space exploration, but this was then kind of almost the final part of the main hub, just finishing off with the rocket science. And yes, built some red circuits. We also built, of course, a lot of cars to, we invested in these AAI autonomous vehicles for a while and used these vehicles to help clear out the biters. So we had to build all these different types of vehicles and different types of ammo and lots of tank action early on, just lots and lots of space we had to clear out for all the biters to build this massive train network that we eventually got around to building. So right around the time, we were finishing up with rocket science, we started building, of course, the train network. And the miracle of space exploration was that once you started launching satellites, we got the gift of an early requester warehouse. And my goodness, this early requester warehouse really just made the whole middle train section of the game so much better. And so I'm going to get into more details on the train network, but this is basically the main heart of the train network, this one station in the hub that provides essentially all of the material to the rest of the base through the LTN network. And so what's great about LTN is you can really put just everything you want to onto one train stop. And essentially we just use this one requester chest to ask for every logistics item that we wanted, and then by just letting the LTN network know what's in this requester chest, it can provide it to the whole system. And so this is what we use to build the entire base, basically. And what was also very important is the recycle system. So this is just then a recycling train, and it is actually a normal Factorio train. It's not part of the logistics train network, but its job is just to run around to various train stops, and if there's anything that needs to be recycled back into the base, it'll come back into here and just get dumped into these warehouses. And then again, the contents of these warehouses get put onto the LTN network. And so anything that gets recycled will also just have access, the trains will have access to, and they'll get recycled and all that stuff. So I'll get into more details about how to properly set this up and everything that it does. But this is, just still the overview. And so, but this is like our main train station. And then of course we built out the train network. So I have these train blueprints that are still kind of evolving, but basically the heart of them are these tracks that are just right next to each other. And what's important is to make sure you can get the change signals correct when you do a turn. And so by having the tracks kind of bow out, you can make sure you have the change signals in the appropriate places. And mainly what you have to make sure of is you want the trains going through the junction that don't actually cross to not block each other. So that is the main goal of like having a chain signal back here and needing chain signals, especially in between the tracks. So that way the train going north doesn't ever block the train going south, etc., etc. And then I like the side-by-side rails too, because you can make a 2x2 train track as well and just get it to be as compact as possible, and then have these pretty sophisticated junctions. And also what's nice about the system, I typically try to maintain this hexagonal grid pattern and have the trains only go left, but the train tracks can make complete four-way crossings if you just to put the two three-way junctions on top of each other, and so trains can still go straight across in these junctions, and has all the nice properties as well. So I have, I think, this blueprint book now for the basic train grid that's still valid in vanilla as well. So this is kind of the main thing. And then, of course, part of the train system is also these train stations. And here we made the design with extra room in the stackers so that we could just put down these LTN depots so the LTN trains have a place to live. And at each station, we built then the main logistics hub requester train stops. So essentially all of the design of the train network is to have effectively little independent RoboPort networks at every build site. And essentially this allows, we don't want the robots to have to like try to go across the entire map to build whatever buildings we want to do. So instead what happens is this LTN stop requests all the building material that we want from the main base, and the LTN trains can bring it to us. And what was vital for doing this and what makes it super convenient is actually this mod called the Ghost Scanner. And so you can install another mod besides the logistic train network called the Ghost Scanner, and it is designed to be compatible with the LTN network. And so let's see, there are some mod settings of the Ghost Scanner that basically says invert output and round to stacks. These are kind of the things you need for the most simple way of making the Ghost Scanner work with LTN. And basically what happens then is as you put down ghosts, okay, well, bots, let's see, what's something that we don't probably have here? Oops. Yes, okay, ghosts, they will show up in the Ghost Scanner. And so the round to stacks makes the, say, 5 ghosts that are being counted here go round to 10. And then the negative number also is used for the LTN. So that was the other button we pressed. And so this number is then something that the LTN network can handle. And since the LTN network usually has a stack threshold, so usually you set this requester station to have a stack threshold of 1, and then the round to stacks, this way if you only put down 1 beacon, the requester will still actually request beacons, and they'll come from the train network. And so this way, whenever we build any buildings, the materials are actually transferred by a train to a local RoboPort network, and then the local bots are able to just pull from the train network, and we can just put down whatever ghosts we want, and the Ghost Scanner will make sure the items arrive through the logistics system. And so we've been doing that the entire time to build all of these different builds in the train, in this like distributed train network. And we followed kind of a basic pattern where we built a output station and then input stations, and sort of have this design where the inputs go up and around and down and through the build, and then the kind of results come back. So this was the fuel station that we built very early on. Actually, what I can do is switch my thruster suit here. Yeah, there we go. Much faster. And then, yeah, we just started building all these different builds for kind of building out this distributed train network. So very early on, we built, 8 lanes of iron processing and 8 lanes of steel processing, which is currently getting completely devoured. Yeah, and then we built all the copper in sort of the mirror image way, and also stone bricks. And we just went through the entire chain of production to build all of the various parts and put them onto the train network. And the base is currently just devouring everything, it looks like, which is great. Red circuits just don't even have enough copper because green circuits are devouring everything. Got some blue circuits. And so, yeah, we just built these stations everywhere, and built stations out here just for mining, and just built and built and built this distributed train system. And then one of the, definitely the whole oil build is probably one of the most complicated and serious builds. So it's great to see actually all the oil processing going kind of all at once right now even. So definitely space exploration requires a lot of oil processing. And fortunately, the oil is actually an infinite resource in the end. So I was worried we're going to run out of oil, but well, eventually the oil just kind of runs down to a flat rate. And if you just start jamming things with speed modules, you actually get quite a bit of production. So by just even putting beacons and speed modules around, we're really able to sustain. I think this is over 1,000 oil per second, and just using the speed modules was key to sustaining the oil flow and the oil production, and and then it will last essentially forever. So it's pretty much flattened out in terms of the fall off now, and so we just loving all this oil getting built. And let's see this, I guess the plastic and the sulfur just eating all the petroleum gas. And then we built all this barreling machinery over here to get the barrels ready for going onto the rocket. And then after we built all this train network, we finally built the coup de grace, I guess, of the whole train system, which is our Cars on Belts main hub, where we finally started building the cargo rockets. And man, I designed this two-way kind of in and out train station to interface then with the Cars on Belts. And so yes, if you don't know, like, you can do some pretty cool stuff with Cars on Belts in Factorio, and just works in SpaceX as well as in vanilla Factorio. But we are just able to build this like entire hub using Cars on Belts, and it's just so easy for the logistics to build just like basically everything. And so essentially the way it works is, of course, you can see that the cars will just sit on the belts and move. And if you put inserters kind of one tile away from the belt, you don't want them to actually touch the belt, but touch next to the belt, then they can pull and draw from the car's inventories. And you can use the car inventory and you can set these filters in the car inventory so you can regulate all of the contents that you want on the system pretty easily. And so since it has so many inventory slots, you can make a pretty complicated logistics system with the cars. And they also have just incredible amounts of throughput. So this is still just like a ton of throughput. So you can imagine just having literally, like, this would be an 80-lane bus system of resources that are coming through just these Cars on Belts. But then, so then all these resources get loaded into the cars, and they just zigzag their way through all this production. So then we built, of course, intermediate products and logistics buildings, life support, power armor stuff, solar panels, modules, all the things for cargo rocket parts, all the sciences, and yes, eventually bots, blue belts. And then eventually I also have all the intermediate products from the specialist sciences, like the holmium cables and such. Then space elevator cables, delivery cannon capsules also get built here. All these things will get built here. But this has just been the hub, and it really does it all. And it's also nice because it interfaces really well with the train network. So then we have a couple of train stops that interface also with parts of the Cars on Belts system. And the point is to just do stuff for the cargo rockets. So over here was like some recycling for the cargo rocket from the orbit to come back and recycle stuff. And here we provide to the train network the cargo rocket parts for other cargo rocket launch areas. And of course, we have our cargo rocket for going to orbit and providing things to orbit where, yeah, we just directly pull off the sciences and modules and things like that, the rocket parts themselves, and shoot them up to space. And we're able to then just use the LTN network to request whatever we want to send on the cargo rocket and send it to orbit. So just putting these, all these negative numbers onto the requester will get the LTN to provide just about everything. And so just need to use this communication network then to make sure the inventories are balanced with the requests. And this has been driving all of the logistics for the space station. Yes, so we then built the space station, of course. And as you see it now, it is all designed around this sushi belt concept. Oh man, it's jammed. That's not good. Okay, well, basically, yes, there we go. The entire main base, or the space station, yes, is a sushi belt design. And so when we got to space, we were granted some of these deep space transport belts, which are 90 items per second, so twice as fast as a normal blue belt. And so to take advantage of them, I sort of designed this sushi belt concept. And so although it's kind of ugly, the green wire is essentially covering every tile of the belt, and every belt is just counting how many items are in the system. And essentially these combinators all over the place are checking how much stuff is on the belt, and again, making sure the contents of the sushi belt sort of match what all of these constant combinators are requesting. And so using this circuit logic, we can then have the filter inserters change their filters to be whatever's missing from this big requester. And so we can request essentially arbitrary items out of the logistics network and put them onto the sushi belt and sort of keep a constant buffer of all sorts of items available to the network. And eventually it got to the point where there just wasn't enough surface area. So there are all these buildings, and there was kind of like not enough surface area to get access to the sushi belt for all these buildings, for how many, because we only had so many of these fast transport belts. And then the other thing is like there's kind of this buffering issue. So if the bigger the sushi belt is, the longer it sort of takes things to get around places. And if there's not any buffers being built up, things would stall out and slow down. So to essentially alleviate these things, we designed a sushi belt junction, where basically stuff from one sushi belt is transferred onto a different sushi belt. And so we have these smaller production zones where we just use the normal space transport belts. But again, it's basically like a system where these combinators will request from the main belt the items we want on this side belt, and set the filter inserters to pick out the items. And what also was critical was kind of setting it up so that these filter inserters only look for things kind of in this zone right here. And so this way it's sort of not distracted by what's far away. But ultimately this was really, really useful for the sushi belt, I think, and we were able to build a bunch of different production zones. So we built this like recycling center over here, and we built this zone for building all the buildings, some space scaffolding we just pulled right off the belt, some of the things we just pull right off the belt, like space science and belts and pipes and stuff. Then we built these areas for the fluids, for doing chemical gel, thermofluid. We built this area for data cards, so constantly building data cards. So we're going to need a lot of data cards. And we built a little area for doing production science and utility science over here. So this is kind of the theme of the space station, was just to create these little offshoots of sushi belt designs and just continue to build on this concept. And we also have the spectral mirror, multispectral mirror section where we build solar panels and telescopes. And then also we finally just built the ion stream so that we could refuel our spaceship. So we also eventually got this spaceship from the asteroid belt, but reconfigured it a bit to be a little smaller and nimble. So this has been helping us colonize the rest of the solar system. So we've been flying around to different planets in the spaceship to set up our logistics. And then, yes, after the space station, we had to then go colonize a few planets to get the resources for production science and utility science. So the first place we went was the sort of lava Vulcan planet Granus, Vulcanite planet, and we built our first system for sending cargo rockets to another planet and setting it up on the train network. So over here in Granus is the landing pad and just supplying its contents to the train network. And again, very much a similar design as in the main hub, where the cargo rockets can supply onto the LTN network, which just gets onto, so all the contents in these chests just get put on the LTN, and these smart filters again are able to just set their filters to whatever is being requested, and so the LTN can manage all the building of the whole network here. And we also supply a lot of the materials for the vulcanite processing. So we had to bring in sulfur, water, and what else, oil or something to process the vulcanite. So we decided to process vulcanite locally, petroleum gas. And so we import actually these resources from the main base, and we mine the vulcanite and bring it over here to process the vulcanite into vulcanite blocks, because the vulcanite blocks stack a lot higher than the raw vulcanite ore. So this makes the transport logistics a lot more efficient to process it locally. So we built the train network to mine and process the vulcanite, and then we supply it on our return cargo rocket via the train network. So again, we have this essentially basic blueprint where we interface cargo rockets with logistics train network, and again, just are able to set the requests onto the combinators, use some communication satellites or not to just measure the contents and compare them to the requests. And the LTN network handles all the requests for us, and so mostly we're just, in this case, bringing in vulcanite in bulk, but then also like a little bit of landfill and steel is being recycled back to Novice. And so the rocket also supplies rocket fuel, which is then turned into liquid rocket fuel here. And this is just our basic system for returning cargo. And so we have then on two kind of export train stations for rockets as well. So these are our supply rockets, and I think this is our supply rocket for Granus. Yes. So this one gets supplied with the sulfur and the petroleum gas, and of course it needs cargo rocket parts and rocket fuel occasionally. And again, just set by these combinators, comparing all the contents, getting a signal from Granus, and having the LTN network manage the cargo rockets. It's just how it all works. And whenever this fills up, it blasts off to Granus to give it to more supplies. Then we built this one to go to the asteroid belt, and that was really mostly just to get the spaceship, but we'll be using the asteroid belt soon enough. And then we built this one to go to our second colony, the moon Ermintrude, where we mine the cryonite. And so you can check out Ermintrude really quickly. Yes, so very similar to Granus, we came to Ermintrude to build a train system and very similar, built a spaceport that interfaces with the LTN network, built a recycling and fuel, very similar to the main base, and came to the moon Ermintrud to mine cryonite and to also process it into cryonite rods. But unlike Granus, Ermintrud actually has a lot of the basic resources, and we actually set up even oil processing on Ermintrud, got some oil. We built all this oil processing, just copied the build from Novice, and we are building oil on Ermintrud, and then that allows us to actually build also sulfuric acid and the heavy oil needed for the cryonite processing. And we also build the rocket fuel locally, so Ermintrud is much, much more self-sufficient than Granus in terms of needing resources to both do the production of cryonite. So we have the locally sourced heavy oil, and the moon has water and such, so we can do it all here. And then, yeah, we don't need to send the rocket fuel either, which is often most of the room on the cargo rockets is for bringing rocket fuel here to fuel the rockets to send the resources back home. But Ermintrud unfortunately doesn't need that. It still needs to receive the cargo rocket parts, so it still does need some logistics taken care of. But yeah, pretty self-sufficient little moon colony we got out here. And then finally, yes, we built these landing pads to bring back the resources to Novice. And so this is our landing pad logistics system. Basically, again, in this case, it's kind of for bulk transport. So the intention is that primarily one resource is going to be being brought in through these landing pads, and vulcanite and cryonite in this case, and then the primary resources getting loaded onto the train network into these LTN systems again, using these bulk rail loaders and such. But the system can also handle a lot of the recycling. So these filter inserters are designed to actually blacklist the one primary resource, and put everything else onto these belts. And the belts filter out then the rocket parts that are getting recycled and everything else, and sorts them into these different recycling systems. So we have a special station to deal with the space capsules and the cargo rocket sections. And then the rest of the recycling, steel and landfill, whatever else, anything else, will just go back into our recycle request. And this is, the recycling station for recycle request. And so, if these fill up beyond a certain threshold, then the station will open and the recycling train will come, pick up everything up, bring it back to our main hub, and put it back onto the LTN network, where anything that demands it will get access to it, and it'll eventually get recycled. So that is pretty much the logistics for everything. So then, we can check out kind of most of the base is run on these solar panels we built everywhere. So we have nice, clean, renewable power, 3 gigawatts of solar power, more or less. Just built it all over the place. Pretty simple. Solar power is definitely really good in space exploration. And we've really cut off all this area. So I guess, again, also finally talk about the walls. And now we have artillery going, and we've been then building, just have these kind of train stations to supply logistics for the walls. So there's another special LTN stop that then is set up in a particular way to still request material like our normal LTN requester, but then also will directly feed things like ammo onto these ammo belts to supply the wall. And yes, eventually we needed a lot more defense. The uranium ammo was needed with the behemoth fighters. The laser turrets are nice, but they're pretty weak. And just like, I had to use the mines and now the flamers, and so pretty intense with the walls. But I think now the fighters are the attacks are pretty pretty mediocre because once we cleared out this area to the east, the pollution cloud really doesn't hit the bases as intensely, so we're getting a bunch of attacks down here, but they're usually pretty mild compared to back in the day when we had to just, everything was coming through this choke point. So at one point, before we cleared out this part, this was our main battle choke point, and just thousands and thousands of biters were coming through here. We probably have, yeah, like 12,000 kills. It's like 4 million damage, you know, so this was a very, very busy choke point for the biters, and most of the time our primary defense point. And yeah, I just can go around and admire some more of the train builds, and yeah, we built out just all of the logistics, all the stuff on the train network using this kind of design, and it's so nice, man. I really enjoyed building this train network. Yeah, cool. But then I think this will call it for our little base tour and base overview. And I'll now, I think, jump in and do a little more detailed walkthrough about various other mechanics of this base, and have a couple tutorial sessions. So stay tuned for that stuff. But until then, there you go, Factorio. I'm Pax. See you in the next video.